I want to talk briefly about the Republicans. This is sort of a funny question, but here's the way I want to frame it. Of the Republicans in the race right now, which do you fear most? Fear is a funny word. Which would you least like to face as a candidate, and which would you least like to see as an actual president? I take it that for me at least, they're not necessarily the same thing. For me, the one who I mean, of the top tier candidates, the one who I actually find would probably be the worst president would actually be Giuliani, just because the people he's surrounding himself with, his foreign policy advisors, are such lunatics, frankly, that I think it's very frightening to think what he would do on the foreign policy front. You know, Romney, he talks a good game on, you know, Islamofascism and blah, 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 blah. I'm not so convinced he would actually, you know, be as crazy as Rudy would as a president. But again, as a candidate, who do you think would be the most challenging to face?
The one that I used to fear early on was actually Huckabee. I think he's quite a political talent, and I think would have played well nationally. I think he does a great job of hiding just how far right he is, with very compelling rhetoric. So I used to be worried about him, but clearly we found that he's too lazy to raise the money, doesn't have the organization, so he's out of the running. And I think in a lot of ways we may have dodged the bullet on that one. So of the top tier, I think clearly it's going to have to be Giuliani. He has a reputation that may not be warranted of being very moderate. On social issues, he clearly has a record of being socially liberal. Of course, he's trying to backtrack on a lot of that to try to appeal to more of the right-wing Republican primary electorate. But if you look at poll after poll, I mean, he polls the best against our candidates by far. Romney polls the worst, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that nobody knows who he is. So I wouldn't expect Romney to be blown out the way he seems to be getting blown out in the polls. But Giuliani, by far, of course, Giuliani is also very a flawed candidate in very, very many ways, and which is true of all the Republicans. So I feel fairly optimistic moving into this. But yeah, clearly of the Republicans, Giuliani would be the biggest challenge.
Now, is it the same for actually thinking of one of these guys actually being president? Is he the one, let's say we set aside the campaign, one of them's got to be president. Who's the one of the top tier you'd least like to see be president? Just for what he would actually do. Set aside how he'd be to run against.
Oh, okay. Boy, pick your poison, right? Well, who would be? You know, I think you may be right on Giuliani, though, because he is an authoritarian of the worst kind. I don't even think it has to do much with his advisors. He himself is very much an authoritarian. There was that funny quote that we made a lot of noise about, where he talked about how freedom meant being subjugated under strong leadership or something crazy like that. It's a very Orwellian definition of what freedom was, which had nothing to do with actual freedom. So he's pretty scary. On these social issues, I think he'd be, you know, maybe not as scary. But of course, he's not going to nominate pro-choice Supreme Court nominees. I mean, he's going to have to run for re-election. So he's going to have to give the right wing, you know, whatever it is that they want, the social right. You know, these anti-gay, anti-choice, right-wing lunatics. So all in all, I mean, it'd be pretty brutal kind of choice.
Okay, so Giuliani on the worst, both as a candidate from the Democratic point of view and also as a president. We've taken a lot of your time. One last question. You know, both of us, all the campaigns have now, in addition to a conventional press staff, have blogger outreach. So you've got to be on the receiving end of tons of this stuff. How effective is it, and which campaigns do it well or don't do it well?
Yeah, you know, the blogger outreach people, I mean, they're probably some of my favorite people, and I gotta say that almost every day, you know, half of them are yelling at me. So I think by far the worst campaign on this is the Obama campaign. Absolutely terrible. You
know, it's fun. That has been our experience too. And it's weird given their sort of, you know, that they put themselves forward as this kind of tech Web 2.0 campaign. But tell us more. Why is that? Or why do you think that?
You know, I don't know. And they had a guy, Josh Orton, who was actually very good at what he did at, you know, doing the blog outreach stuff, and they just recently fired him, or he resigned or something. But there was a lot of friction between him and the campaign, and to be honest, I think effective blog outreach requires a blogger, you know, a coordinator who is in the inner circle of the decision-making process. He's somebody who's sitting there with the media consultant and the direct mail guy and the communications director, and he's in that decision-making process. And I think some of the campaigns do that fairly well. I don't know if they're all, you know, if they have their guys sitting in that big room and that big table, but some of them at least give their networks guy really quick, strong access to the decision makers in a campaign, which I think is important, because when I'm about to write a story and I send an email to the blog outreach person, I expect a response in 5 minutes. Otherwise, in my mind, their campaign didn't respond. And so I think the Edwards campaign has excellent blog coordinator, Tracy Russo. I think the Hillary Clinton campaign, of course, every facet of that campaign is well-oiled and extremely effective. And they have an excellent blogger outreach operation in Peter Dow and a couple other people over there. So the Dodd campaign, obviously, they have Tim Tagaris, which I think is the best. I think he is the best in the business as far as blogger outreach. So those are the three campaigns that have done really, really well. So Edwards, Edwards, Clinton, and Dodd. And the rest, you know, the Richardson campaign has a guy who actually is pretty good. I just don't feel they give him the kind of access that he needs to properly do his job. And the rest of the campaigns, you know, there are also rants. But the Obama campaign particularly stands out in how ineffective they are in that department.
For what it's worth, that's definitely been our experience too. Listen, Markos, thanks so much for your time. And perhaps we will do this again after the primary campaign moves a little further along.
Absolutely, anytime. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much. All right, bye-bye.